Welcome to The Good, the Bad, and the Sequel Q&A. My name's Doug. So the next sequel that we're going to be talking about is our first time going to the Star Wars universe. It's Ewoks, The Battle for Endor, free on Disney+. I'm super excited to be able to talk with Jamie about this one. I don't know how he's going to like it. He's not a big Star Wars, Star Trek fan, but I'm really excited. I love Star Wars. I love Return of the Jedi. So Ewoks are for me. I'm pretty excited. I'm pretty excited. Add an extra pretty in there to chat with this week's guest, composer Peter Bernstein. Wow. These two movies, the Ewoks and the sequel, The Battle for Endor, those are like the big moments in his career. That was like his flagship. We kind of talked about that. I love asking people that question. What was like that turning point or role or thing that you did that people would look to and be like, oh, he did that. So that was like his big moment. Cool story about how that all came to be and just the process for, coming up with it for a franchise that had a composer that everybody knows, at that point. So man, Peter talked about it from the beginning, his love of rock and roll, being in bands, just being around music for so long, how he got started, even though his father's legendary composer Elmer Bernstein. It's not like that was his first thing that he thought about doing. It was more rock and roll. But his transition to that, working on amazing films over the years, especially the comedies that he did with his dad, with a connection of John Landis, because Peter went to high school with him. There's so many good stories in this. So I'm going to shut my yapper, but do me a favor if this is your first time here. Please subscribe wherever you're listening. Share, tell your friends, tell your enemies, just tell anyone at all. And follow us on all social media at Sequels Only and subscribe on YouTube. Lots of instructions. So I'm not going to repeat it again. You can go back 15 seconds. Let's do it again. But without further ado, here is composer Peter Bernstein. So what I like to do with these, my favorite thing is how people got started in the business and, those early memories, like the big breaks, but there's always that beginning, like the influence. So right. Obviously with your father, you had influence not too far away. Like at what age, like when you're growing up, do you realize like who your dad was, or like the movies, like when you connect the two, like, oh, my dad does that music?
Well, I don't remember when, because it was too early.
It was, yeah.
I would say that, it didn't feel unusual to me.
Yeah.
It was just, that's what he did. I went to a small private school here in Los Angeles, and in that private school were the children of several other big-time Hollywood composers.
Oh, wow.
It felt completely normal that somebody's father would have an Academy Award nomination every year. I'm a kid, so that's reality, and that's what everybody does. So it didn't, it didn't dawn on me until much later that for most people it wasn't like that.
Yeah, I talked to Sandy Hackett, Buddy Hackett's son, and he told me when he was like, he knew that his dad was like this really funny guy, but like at home he was like a cut up. But he said he saw him in, trying to think of the movie. It was like a cartoon / movie when they're like slaying a dragon, and his dad's head gets cut off in the movie. And I think he was 6 years old, and he like ran out of the movie theater crying. And then his dad came home like right after he came home from the theater and was like, "Why are you crying?" And he's like, "Dad, I saw your head get cut off." So, and that's back then, like, movies are more magical then than they are now. I'm not saying they're not magical, but so what age? So music is all around you. So I read your little bio. So you started piano. That was like the first type of music that you dabbled in.
Like kids have piano lessons,
Oh, okay. And then you said, no, I want to go right into rock and roll.
Well, no, it wasn't like that. I mean, I was still doing piano. And, just to backtrack a little bit, I remember seeing my dad conduct the music from The Magnificent Seven. And I was 9 at the time. And he was a very passionate person. So I was seeing him conduct with full on adult passion, which is, as a 9-year-old, you know, the first time you see something like that, it's very impressive.
Yeah.
And the first time I saw something like that, it was connected with music. So that made a big impression. But as far as being a musician is concerned, I took piano lessons. Maybe I had a guitar lesson. I don't remember. But when I was 14, the Beatles, 19 was 19, well, 13, 1964, the Beatles and Bob Dylan entered my brain, which exploded.
Yeah.
And, and, nothing has ever been the same since. And of course, I was at the exact right age. I was 13. So I was just at the dawning of being able to see the world, you know, and it made a big impression. There was a rock and roll band in my school, which had a bass player who had no clue what he was doing. And I looked at him and went, I can do that. I know a little music. So I, I became the bass player. I didn't know how to tune it. I was tuning it wrong for a year. Uh, I suppose I could have asked my dad, but who wants to know what your dad thinks?
Yeah.
And, uh, and it went on from there. I mean, I was a rock and roll bass player, or in somehow involved in the rock and roll business for the next 20 years.
Wow. Yeah, I saw some of the people you worked with, like Linda Ronstadt, and like some of the people that you did producing for.
Well, I didn't produce for Linda, but I worked on some of her stuff and
Oh, okay.
I was on the same scene as the bunch of people from California, Linda, the Eagles, Jackson Brown being the main names. And it was all, everybody was there. We were all young, so it was all cool.
Wow.
And but for me personally, by the time I was, getting towards my 30s, I was becoming aware that there was more opportunity for me somewhere else.
Yeah. What were some of the bands that you opened up for? Did you ever open up for any of
Oh,
those?
yeah,
Like,
all kinds of people. I mean,
wow.
you know, uh, who are some of the memorable ones? I don't know. Um, now you're making me think.
How about this? This might be a little bit easier. What about some venues? Did you play up and down the West Coast or tour the country?
Everywhere, everywhere,
Nice.
everywhere. The East Coast. I think it was the old Orpheum chain. It's before your time, I think.
Yeah.
They were vaudeville theaters that were still in use. Uh, New York, Philadelphia, somewhere in Jersey,
Yeah.
down. Same deal on the West Coast. I do remember opening for Warren Zevon. I just forgot about that.
What? Where, up in San Francisco or?
That was like Vancouver, and
Nice.
did we open for Neil Sedaka, or was I just hanging with the band? I can't remember. A long
It must
time
have been
ago.
a good time. Yeah.
Yeah, we had a pretty good time.
That's
That's
awesome. So what was the transition? You said obviously there's other opportunities. Was it right away thinking,
I was always musically curious. So, and I knew there was a lot more going on because of the way I grew up. And I did get myself educated in the midst of all that musically.
yeah,
And at one point, this has got to be in the mid 70s, earlier, maybe 73, 74. I went to my father and I said, I think I'd like to learn to orchestrate music. And at that time, I was in whatever band I was in, and I was producing records and touring and all of that. But I wanted to do that. And he said, okay, fine, pick something, orchestrate it, and bring it to me. So I found a piano piece I'd been working on, and I orchestrated it, and I brought it to him, and I guess it was good enough because he let me work for him on his films. I was like the number 3 guy at the time, and there was a lot to learn. But 3 years later, I was doing his films by myself. So it worked out really well. And I stayed in the rock and roll business even past the time I was a composer.
Wow.
So I, yeah, I recently saw what is it, a calendar of mine from the early 80s. And it just blew me away how busy I was doing so many different things.
I bet it was like studio for bands, studio for like
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
cool that you kept. That's cool that you have that.
Meeting about a record, meeting about a film, studio, stay home and write, every day.
What was the process like when you're performing? Like one of the early ones that I see on here is like Slapshot, working as an orchestrator. Like, what is that like? Are you just in a studio? Is the movie playing and you're playing along with it? Like, what?
He's writing the music.
Oh, okay.
He's seen the film. He's writing the music to notes that his music editor would have prepared, which
Okay.
would go like, we're going to put music here, and it starts at this point, and then 3 seconds in this happens, and 45 seconds in this happens, and that's how you know how to sync the music with what's happening on the screen. I mean, it gets more technical than that, but that's basically how it works. And that was before computers. Now I could just look at it, you
Yeah.
know, on my screen and write to it, but you couldn't do it then. And so he would write the music based on what I said. He would write it on maybe 4 lines of music, looked like, something being played by 4 instruments. And then I would take that as the orchestrator and expand it out to a full orchestra uh, based on either his handwritten notes on the music that he gave me, or our conversations, or just my understanding of what he wanted. And then
Wow.
a day or so later, it would show up on the recording stage, and they'd record it.
That's awesome. So
And I
no,
would
I see for
go ahead.
Linda Ronstadt, I see it says album arranger. So that's what you did. You put the
Oh, I couldn't really think of.
what to name it.
Well, she was doing a bunch of songs from that the band I was in was doing.
Oh, okay.
So, because that's how Linda worked. She'd find something she liked and do a bunch of their songs. She did it with Warren Zevon too,
Oh, wow.
and another friend of mine, Carla Bonoff, and just various people. So, yeah, I was there to sort of help guide it through the arrangements that we were using and adjust to what she wanted to do.
So yeah, so you're doing this. You're still doing the band. You're working as an orchestrator. Like at what point was there like that switch that you were like, this is what I want to do full time? Did you try to at one point try to do both, and then it just got to the point that you had to pick one?
I'd love to say it was a conscious decision like that, but no, I was just following the work.
Yeah.
The work was coming from this direction, so I followed that and I stopped looking in the other direction. I mean, maybe I could have done more, but I there was no, I didn't have that burning desire, you know, and you really have to have that in music, or I suppose any artistic endeavor. If you don't have it, what are you doing there?
Yeah. No, that's true. And from what I've heard from other people, like music, you really have to love it because you can't make unless you're like have a lot of big concerts or album deals. You're not like making a lot. I don't know if that was the case with what you were doing.
Composer role's okay, but
Oh,
it,
I know. I mean, composer. I'm talking about actually like playing in bands.
oh, forget it. Although I have to say there is a lot more in live work than there used to be. It used to be that if you were in a band, when I was in a band, you'd make a record and the record company would subsidize your tour to sell the record. Well, now it's exactly the other way around.
Yeah,
You make a record so that people will come see your tour, which is where you make the money.
that's true.
It's crazy, yeah. But in any event, for me, it just my priorities changed. It was a little harder to stay up all night partying and play the next day.
Yeah.
Just was. And the work was coming from another direction, and I did have a burning desire as far as being a composer was concerned. In the rock and roll world, I wasn't usually the songwriter. I was never the singer. So, uh, and even, I did produce a number of records, but as far as the band thing goes, I was rarely one of the main people, and which was fine. I liked being a bass player, but there was more for me in this other area.
Do you remember the first time you were like like the composer? So the first one I see on here is Silent Rage. Was that the first one?
That was no. There's another one before that, and I can't remember the name, so it's probably not on my list.
Probably, yeah.
But it was an episode of something that a friend of mine, no time or just didn't want to, I can't remember, and he said, "Here, you write it." And I went, "Okay." And so I'm up at my house with a pad of paper and a piano, and there's a power outage. So that wasn't going to work. So I took my little tiny keyboard, electronic keyboard, and we went down to a friend's house about 2 miles away that still had power. And I wrote the thing on her kitchen table, overnight. And that was my first experience as a composer.
That's cool.
Silent Rage was early on. I don't think it was the first thing. That was a Chuck Norris film.
It was, yeah.
That was early on. Like everything else, I got that job because I knew somebody.
Oh yeah, that's how everything's, for the most part, that's how it starts, and then you just have to seize the opportunities. You can get the opportunity from knowing someone, but then if you don't nail it, there's going to be a point that they're going to be like, there's so many actors in Hollywood that you see them in so much, and then you're like, they're not too good. And then it's like, hey, what happened to that guy?
You have to be able to do both things. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Silent Rage. Interesting. Most people think I started working because my father was steering me towards work. It didn't happen that way at all. And I don't really make a big deal out of it unless someone asks, but all my early work came through my rock and roll connections.
Wow.
Either members of my band or old bands went into the television or film industry, and I knew them, so I knew other people, and things just happened that way.
Look at that. Everybody got out. Everybody got out of the rock and roll and they went into TV and film.
Well, a lot of people did, not everybody.
Yeah. No, I know.
I am thankful that I was never just on the edge of being successful enough to keep going, right?
Yeah.
Keep going, and never quite having it work. I at some point I knew it was I was approaching the precipice, so I just stopped before I had to.
Yeah. What was like the turning point for you? Because it's like with anybody, like actors, cinematographers, you have like that one job you do that is like the billboard for like your resume. Like what was that one for you that they were like, oh, Peter, I want you to do like you did in blank? Was there any movie?
I had two. I had two projects for Lucasfilm called
awesome.
The Ewok Adventure and the Ewok something else.
Yeah.
In the mid 80s. And like, I'm like the first not John Williams guy to be writing this music in the Star Wars universe, which was pretty damn scary. And a year later, I started doing a TV series called 21 Jump Street.
Nice.
So those were both like really noticeable, and that's what it was. Someone said to my father many years ago when he was struggling, said, what you need to secure yourself is 2 hits back to back. And that was kind of that for me, the Lucasfilm stuff and 21 Jump Street.
That's a big show.
Yeah. And then it was like, okay, I'm here. Didn't make
it. And it looks... Oh, I'm sorry. What were you saying?
I said, okay, I'm here. Not that it made it a whole lot easier, but at least I wasn't struggling against, who are you?
Yeah, that's true. No, it looks like from there, like you worked on like so many like really good TV shows.
I worked a lot.
Yeah.
A lot, yeah.
It's really I loved Weird Science. I talked to Vanessa Angel. That was a great TV
I,
series. Yeah, another great show. And like you had a chance to like Alfred Hitchcock. Like that's a really cool thing.
one episode of that,
Oh, but
yeah.
that's still cool.
You know, I know it looks that way, maybe,
No.
but for everybody, it's like another gig. You know, I one of the last things I orchestrated was Ghostbusters.
That's amazing.
People lose their minds about, but by the time the movie was released, we were on 3 jobs past that. And
Yeah.
you just churn and you keep going and you keep going and you don't think about it. And it's at least in the music world. And now 38 years later, I'm amazed. Ghostbusters being what it is, I conduct Ghostbusters with a live score now.
That's awesome.
They show the movie, and I'm the conductor doing the score live. And if you had told me that was going to happen 38 years ago, I would have wanted some of whatever you were smoking.
Yeah. I think people were nobody could picture the future of like the digital and things being on demand and
No.
like easy access. Cause I've interviewed directors that thought like their movies would be like forgotten about in 5 years. Cause that's not like that happened with all like the Magnificent Sevens, like the Great Escapes, Escape from Out, like those movies stood the test of time. Maybe if we weren't even in the digital age when they were at the touch of a button, but there were
Right.
so many movies that were just like sort of forgotten about. But it's not possible now.
No, everything is available. It's amazing.
Yeah.
This is when I was flying to Europe to record one of the Ewok movies. I don't remember which one. I was flying with my dad because he had a recording session in Europe as well.
Nice.
And he's sitting next to me. And I'm going through all my scores because I'm conducting this thing. And it was going to be the first time that I really conducted a major orchestral score. I was shitless. And he's in the next seat and he's writing a score. Right? No keyboard, nothing. And so, we're landing and I say, listen, how are you able to do that? And not that it was like magic, but because I know people do it, but I just was curious about his process. And his response to me was, look, just wait till you've been doing it another 30 years and you'll be fine. Which might have been true, except that, 5 years after that, I was doing everything on a computer, which was totally unknown at the time. Maybe it was 10 years after that, but, things changed drastically.
What was your process like for that? Like for like the Ewok, just as an example, they send you like cuts of the movie? I know you talked about like that's what it is.
Yeah, I would have, well, in this case, it was beta tapes.
Betamax, yeah.
It's beta of the movie, so I could see it, and it would have time code on it, so I could tell when in the film it was, at least until they re-edited it. But it was just something to gauge, how many seconds would go by before I needed to do something different. And then my music editor would type up notes about where it's supposed to start, where it's supposed to stop, because I would look at this film first with somebody, with George in this case. And, we'll start the music here, we'll stop it there. And so the music editor would take note of that and then type up all the notes so I could see them and would refer to anything that we had discussed about what the music was supposed to do. So that's the process. And then I would write it, and then someone else would orchestrate it. And then both of these were recorded in Munich. So, it was kind of a big deal. But the real process of writing the Ewok music, for me, was deciding who I wanted to be when I wrote it. Because I had never done an orchestral project of that scope before. So I knew who I didn't want to be. There were 2 things I didn't want to be. One was my father,
Yeah.
and the other one was John Williams.
Yeah, exactly.
So I needed to figure out something else for myself. So that was the real project.
And like, is there like how long is the process? I know everything's not the same, but like, is it a process like for that movie? Was that something that took like a few months, like a year? Was it
6 weeks
6 weeks?
for the,
Wow.
yeah, and that's pretty standard. I mean,
It is?
in some productions, it's a very generous amount of time. And
Really?
oh yeah, well, computers again have changed things a lot,
That's true, yeah.
um, and the whole composing world is a little different than it used to be because where I was a solitary person, composers, at a certain level now will have assistants running around and people doing this, that, and the other thing, and assigning, you write this piece of music and you write that piece of music, but I'm going to show you the style. And so it can be a very different process. Not everybody works like that, but many people do.
Yeah. It's like the director and the producer, like people all around, and they give you some kind of like, and I just think it's so fascinating because music's so important. I think music and sound and visually, like those are like music brings you in, like it makes the movie.
Right, right. Um, and it also works on a nonverbal level.
Yeah.
It's an amazing thing because how many people have you asked about music in a movie and they say, I didn't pay attention. I wasn't aware of it, which is a good thing because you don't need to be aware of it. It's going to do what it's going to do to you anyway, whether you know it or not.
Yeah. Evoking emotion, giving you like kind of hints what's coming, like it foreshadowing. Like you can hear that in the music, like ominous tones, and you're like, oh, something's happening.
Well, and music cuts deep. What did we have before we had speech? We had sound.
Yeah. To go back to what you mentioned before, so some of these series that you worked on, there's like one-offs that they call be like, hey Peter, we need you to come in to do one episode of blank.
Yeah, or sometimes they would call me in, we need you to do one episode and maybe you'll do more. Was those kinds of things.
Yeah.
It's, everybody's just struggling to get through the next day, basically.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you hook on with a show that you do 100 episodes of, and sometimes you do one, and sometimes you do 17. It's all different.
Is it difficult to do one when you come in for like one, or like your homework wise, are you like listening to the previous episodes to get some kind of like tonal feel, or are you just going with your own instincts?
Well, it depends on why I'm there. If I'm
Yeah.
there, they're trying me out because maybe they want to do me to do stuff. I'll do me. So they'll
Yeah.
either me or they won't. If I'm there because their regular guy can't do it, then I'm doing their regular guy. So it's all everyone's different. Every single
Yeah.
one is different, and you never know how people are going to react. You just don't. It is so entirely subjective. I did one episode of something. Yeah, I think it was one. This is years ago. And I did the episode and I knew all the people who were working on it regularly, but somehow this one fell to me. And I turned it in and I got notes from the producer, which is normal. You turn the music in, they give you notes, say, can you change that? Start this here instead of there, that kind of thing. And his notes were terrifically insulting. It was amazing. I mean, it was really, did you sit around and try to think of the most insulting things there, or does it just come naturally to you? And so I got his notes, I made what adjustments I could, and I went away. I figured I'd never hear from them again. And I didn't. However, I looked from my royalty reports, I could see that they edited that music or parts of that music into 16 more episodes. So apparently they liked it better than,
They did.
or The other answer is the editor liked it and used it, and the producer who wrote me those notes just wasn't paying attention.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's
Peter, do you
like,
remember like early on, like I know obviously like Silent Rage and other movies you worked on before that, like Meatballs, but did you like do the old go to the movie theater to sort of like hear yourself or get the audience reactions to your music?
um, no, not usually. I mean, there wouldn't be an audience reaction to the music usually.
That's true.
Sometimes I would go to a theater to see how it was mixed in with with everything else, usually with a disappointing result. But no, I mean, I've heard it by the time I'm done, and if I'm there when they're mixing the movie to begin with, then I've heard it all. And
Yeah.
the last thing I want to do is go to a theater and see something I've seen 600 times already.
Yeah, that's true. Especially when you get the Betamax and you're watching it over and over again. At least you have access to it. There's so many actors, they don't see any of it. And then they go to the movie theater and they're like, oh my God, I'm cut out of the movie. Or they use the different scenes and stuff.
Yeah, but there's also people, actors who won't see themselves in movies because it's too um, disruptive for
Yep.
their process, their internal process. You don't want to know, because what you're doing is working, obviously, because you're getting hired. So why try to analyze it?
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel that way about music, actually.
Yeah. Going back to listen to old music or old scores.
I once did a survey. This is just for myself because I've written music with all the time in the world, and I have written music where it needs to be done tomorrow or sooner, right? So I did a little survey of stuff I had all the time in the world to write versus stuff I wrote under duress to see if there's really a difference in quality or the depth of the idea and all of that. There wasn't. No, the only difference was some of the detail work in the quick stuff was a little more ragged, but something that I think only I would notice, and which was fascinating. It made me trust my own process a lot more than I would have otherwise.
Wow. Yeah. I think as anybody, anytime you like an artist, you always catch the mistakes, but other people will never really notice them because they're so minuscule and not something that they would think about.
I had an old music teacher who used to say about that: the minute you're satisfied, you're dead.
That's true. That's true. You always can get better the more you do something.
But then when I listen like a decade later, I'm like, oh, okay, that's okay. And my favorite thing, and because I've written so much music for so many years, is occasionally I'll stumble across something that I really like and go, wow, I wrote that? Cool.
Do you have like a favorite from over the years that like you just said that you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that?
No, that's a little more incredulous than I actually get.
Okay.
Or like kind of, oh, that's cool. But a favorite? No. And if I do have a favorite, it's usually for extremely technical reasons.
Yeah.
And not big music with a capital M reasons.
Yeah.
I'm pleased when it comes to the two I mentioned, the Ewok films. I'm very pleased with the fact that I was able to write my first big orchestral scores, and which was rather terrifying. I mean, that's a good moment for me. And also Jump Street, which was one of the very first shows done in a home studio with samples. It was very early on. It was, I don't know about revolutionary, but there were very, very few people doing that. And that felt great. That felt like, yeah, we're right in the forefront of something here. Many things about that show felt like that.
Did they ever did you ever go up to Vancouver, like to go on set or anything?
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, a ton of friends working on it. So I was up there a lot.
Nice. Yeah, that was like the boom. That right around then was the Vancouver boom that they were like, wow, we could do it a lot cheaper up here. And they filmed so many shows, so many movies at that point. And now It's like the Hallmark capital of the world. That's where Hallmark films like most of their movies because it's so much cheaper.
Yeah.
The dollar stretches.
Yeah. Well, we had a lot of fun in those days because we knew we had something good going. From Patrick, the creator, to the actors, to the sound people, everybody. It was a really nice feeling.
Yeah, and then the guy that was in, I can't think of his name, from 21 Jump Street, he goes on to be in Weird Science. He plays the brother. No, the guy, one of the cops.
I don't think so. Maybe I'm wrong.
No, I thought the one guy, or maybe he just looks familiar.
I don't think so.
No,
but there might have been. I mean, people might have appeared.
Yeah. No, the guy had that familiar face. I don't know if he was on another cop show at that time, but then he ended up being like the kind of dickhead brother on Weird Science for all those years. But
I remember.
Yeah, no, it's a. I only remember because at that age, it's like your formative years. I just remember watching that on USA Network all the time, and
Right.
Vanessa was on it, so I watched it all the time.
Weird Science is one of those jobs where they had an original composer who did the first, I think, 4 episodes, and they didn't like what he was doing, and I did the next 88. I think it was 88.
It's a good gig. That is good.
Yeah.
So one thing I thought was pretty cool. How did it come to be that you started the Elmer Bernstein concert, like the concert series that you would go around the country and doing your father's scores?
I don't know if I so much started it as it found me. There is a market for his music in concert world, and in 2013, I did a film music festival in Spain where his music was the centerpiece of it for the older set. I mean, there were a lot of young guys there too, me among them. But they did a whole concert of his music, which they asked me to conduct. I had conducted music at one of his memorial concerts, and they asked me if I would like to do that. I think it came through my agent at the time, come to think of it. And I said, sure. So we went over there. I had a fantastic time. It was great. Somehow I made contact with another orchestra. I don't remember how that happened, that wanted to do somewhat of the same thing. So I did it there. And then, I did a few more. And then, the film with a live score thing that's happening started to become really big. And it's great for orchestras because they can sell tickets to this. And,
Yeah.
It's important because it subsidizes some of the more artistic things they do. And I got a call from the Ghost Corp, the people that did Ghostbusters and own the franchise. And they wanted to do this. So we put it together. And that was in 2017, maybe. So 17, 18, 19, of course, pandemic. And this year I'm back doing it again. So I've done a bunch of those.
Nice.
And then I got a call to do The Great Escape.
Love it.
Which was great. I'd like to do more. And I've done other concerts. I've also was responsible for about a decade for getting the music out to orchestras that wanted to play it. So I made a lot of contacts that way, and it just kind of happened. I really like going back to my roots as a performer. That's the best part.
That's got to be pretty special. And with like as a kid, you don't know like composers or who's doing the music, but I just remember my dad having the DVD of The Great Escape, and it was like when DVDs first came out, and they didn't have anything fancy about like all these special menus. And I remember, I think it just said like play and maybe like behind the scenes, but it always played the music. So my dad fell asleep watching the movie, it would never stop. It would just be the dun 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 dun, dun over and over again. So what are some things, obviously you've done so much, musically. Is there any things on the horizon that you're going to be doing? Do you still play like music? Like in a band, do you still play bass or anything?
Oh, I'm the only person stupid enough to hire me to play bass. No, I have them. Hold on.
That's cool.
Here's one of my babies.
Look at that. And you know how to tune it now.
Oh, I do. But no, those days are gone. Takes a certain set of muscles to play a bass guitar all day, and I don't have that. But I can still come up with a good part if I want to record it. So I do. About a year ago, I started composing in partnership with my half-sister, Emily.
Oh, wow.
We have the same father. And that's been great. That is the newest thing I've been doing, and it's really worked out great. She had my job as his orchestrator after me. So
no way. That's awesome.
Yeah, we have a lot of the same training, a lot of the same point of view. So that has worked out really well. We know how to work with family, obviously.
Yeah.
And we've been doing it about a year. We've done a couple of documentaries, one which was nominated for a music award, which was great.
Oh, wow.
And that's kind of the most interesting thing that's happened to me in that world for a while.
Yeah.
On the concert and conducting side, I have a number of things I'm trying to get happening. It's always hard. The time frame in orchestra world is a year or 3. So you have
to plan it out to be able to secure a venue and everything.
Very patient.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Very patient. So there's that, and there's always 40 other side projects. So yeah.
Did you ever do the Ghostbusters live on the East Coast in New York or?
I just did it in Chicago. I've done it. In the East Coast, where have I done it? That's a very good question. Oh, Rochester. I did it up in Rochester.
Oh, okay, nice.
2024 is going to be the 40th anniversary of Ghostbusters. So there will be some events, hopefully in New York City. I mean, the movie takes place in New York City, for God's sake. So
it's got to happen, right?
Why would not that happen? Why would not that happen? Why would that not happen?
And there's another movie in the works, right? So maybe they should plan it out to come out in 2024.
I think
that'd be perfect
on their mind about when it's going to come out, besides the concert. But yes,
yeah.
And I also worked on the last one, Afterlife.
Which is great.
Yeah, as a score consultant, whatever that means. But they really wanted to tie the old movie to the new movie, and some of that involved the music. So that worked out really well.
That's important, I think, when you have a movie that's been so long. I know they did this sort of reboot one, but it was a cool thing to be able to do that. So you said you don't know what that was. What did you do? Was it just being there to offer some advice or notes?
Pretty much.
Okay.
I was there for every piece of music and all the recording and in the writing process. So, I had a lot of input. How much of it made it into the final score, I couldn't say, but they asked, so I answered.
I thought it was a beautiful movie. I cried. I'm not gonna lie. Harold Ramis, that was great.
I was worried about it. Not obviously, but I was, because I couldn't see how they could follow the original movie without any of the original cast, really, who were all incredibly gifted people.
Yep.
But Jason made it work. He made it work well.
I feel like you and your dad followed Bill Murray around a lot, movie wise. Meatballs, Stripes.
Well, we followed around a lot.
That's true.
That's Ivan's doing.
Yeah, that's true. That which is good when you have people that you trust. That's what makes that's one less thing you have to worry about in the movie making process. I'm sure same thing with you. You're like, oh, I know I can count on
Oh, of course.
this person to do that, so I don't have to. I can focus on what I need to focus on.
Well, Ivan and John Landis met my father at Animal House.
Oh
So,
yeah,
the other story is that I knew John Landis because we went to high school together.
no way. I think you're gonna say you worked on Schlock.
No, no, well, no, but I was there for hanging around the filming.
Oh
Uh,
really? I interviewed Eric Robert. Well, I interviewed Eric Robertson, his wife, and
oh,
Eliza was in that. Yeah, and she was in Animal House.
yeah, I went to school with Eliza. I've known Eliza for God, I don't know, 55 years or
Oh
more.
my god, that's
Yeah,
great.
yeah. When did you talk to them?
I talked to them a few years ago.
Haven't seen them for a while.
Yeah, no, she was great, and just her background, like her parents, and what they did in like screenwriting, and
Oh
no,
yeah,
and then an Animal House, and then she's like, because she had a different role in that movie, and then she was pregnant, and then they gave her the other role, and she was pregnant with her son during the filming of Animal House.
yeah. She had a great role in Animal House.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, Eliza is what's the word? Kind of a foundational person in my life.
Oh yeah. She's foundational. She grounds Eric very well.
Yeah.
So is that like a usual thing? I know you went up to set for like 21 Jump Street, but like for most movies and shows you worked on, did you
So
go to set?
just depends.
Yeah.
If I was personal friends with people, yeah, I'd go to sets, or I'd just go to sets that I'm not even writing music for when I'm personal friends with people, just to, be there. But
Nice.
getting back to the story, I went to school with John Landis, who met my father because he came to the school to speak. And John was always going to be a film director, from the time he was 15. So he was really into meeting my father. And, fast forward to, about 10 years later, and he's making Animal House. And we don't know well, I knew what he was doing. I'm sure my dad didn't. John goes to Universal and says, I want Elmer Bernstein to score my film. And Universal said, their music department said, I don't think Elmer Bernstein is going to return your call, actually. But of course, John knew better because he knew
Yeah.
him.
Yeah.
My father took John and I to see the Beatles.
Wow. Where the Hollywood Bowl?
No, at Dodger Stadium, their second to last.
Nice.
Yeah. So he did, my dad did return the call. And I remember looking at the tapes of the movie, some of the raunchier stuff, as he was thinking of what to write. We were talking about orchestration or whatever. And we're looking at this tape, and he turns to me and says, can they get away with that in a movie? Because it was like the first R-rated comedy.
Yeah. And that was like a change for your dad, right? Was that like the first type of movie he did? Like a
Big time.
comedy? Yeah.
He was an Academy Award-winning composer.
No, I know.
Serious scores for the most part. And suddenly he's doing, what we used to call youth comedies. You got kidding. But Ivan and John loved him, and he respected them because they were very good at what they did. And the movies were insanely successful. So why not, right? He stuck with it for about 7-8 years. And then he said, I've had enough of comedies.
Yeah.
But I mean, the movies of the era were Animal House and Stripes and Trading Places, Airplane, Ghostbusters, Three Amigos, and on. And there another an equal amount of comedies that weren't any good.
Yeah.
But yeah, he became the comedy guy for a while, and I orchestrated all that stuff.
That's great. Some, like you mentioned, those are some of the best of all time. Like Airplane is on some lists, it's like one or two always.
Yeah.
Did you, so it's so cool that you could like, so you knew, I guess just growing up in it, like you said, your high school was like a bunch of kids that their dads were composers. So you'd just be able to be like, hey, you know what? I want to go hang out on set one day. That was like a normal
Well, no, I
Tuesday.
didn't do that because that was our dads. Who gave a crap?
That's
You know,
true. Yeah.
I want to hear what my dad's doing. I want to listen to the Beatles. I want to hear what
Yeah.
the record sounds like, you know.
Yeah. But like in the 80s, like while you're working, like you were saying, like some movies, if I was interested in, you'd just be able to, like, what were some movies that you would just pop in on set that were like,
Oh, what movies was I on the set of? Oh, God, I don't know. Ghostbusters for sure.
yeah,
You know, by that time, my father and Ivan had a pretty tight relationship, and Ivan, just wanted to show him what was going on and get him thinking. So yeah, we were there, drove around the sets and watched some filming. Um, Jump Street, of course. I actually tried not to be on a set because it's just boring. If you're not doing anything,
yeah.
it's boring.
Man, Peter, this has been awesome, man. I'm so happy that we connected. And yeah, I've always wanted to talk to somebody that was a composer, just to like learn about the process and how everything works. And
I'm amazed that
yeah.
you've talked to so many people I know.
Yeah, no, people have been so I think because some people is word of mouth. Like Eric really enjoyed it, and William Sadler really enjoyed it. Like he was the one that really changed it for me. When I talked to William Sadler, I was only doing this like 2 months, and I would send out a million emails, and like one person would get back to me, another million, one person would get back. But like William Sadler's uh manager, agent, like just forwarded the email like that day. And I was out to eat with my wife, and our daughter was like 6 months at the time. And it was like the next day, and the girl was like, yeah, he'd be happy to do it. Can you do it tomorrow at 11? And I was like,
Wow.
holy shit, yeah. And yeah, and then whenever I send emails out to people, I'll be like, oh, I interviewed blank, blank, blank. And they're always like, oh, William Sadler. And then it would go to when I would include like Eric or Vernon Wells or Joe Alves.
I mean, how did you get to Eric?
Eric, this is kind of a funny story. So I interviewed Robert Hayes from Airplane.
I did.
And Robert was awesome.
Called 50-50, yeah.
Yeah, that was a Canon film. It was him and RoboCop. I can't think of his name.
Yeah, that guy. Yeah,
Peter Weller.
I scored that movie.
Yeah, so I interviewed Robert Hayes. It was great. And so somebody reached out to me. I don't know if you remember, I don't know if it was like a syndicated show or you were in New York at the time at all, but Opie and Anthony, they were right after Howard Stern in New York. So when Howard left 92.3 and when he went to like Sirius or XM, these guys took over. They were like trying to be Howard, like shock jocks. So they broke up, but like one of the guys' managers called me and said, oh, hi, Doug. I saw you interviewed Robert. And funny story was Robert Hayes in the 80s was the best friends with Anthony's father and was his best man at his wedding. And he'd love to interview him on his show and like talk to him about like hanging with his dad. And so I'm like, oh yeah, sure. I like, who am I? Like, I was like, I can send you an email. I'm not going to give you like phone numbers. And the guy was like, oh, thanks so much for doing that. In exchange, I'll connect you with Eric Roberts. So I'm like, all right.
Great.
So,
you know what's crazy about the things, that when I look back is that no cell phones, right? Back then.
yeah.
And the photos that I don't have from those days, with George Lucas or Johnny Depp or Bo Derek or, whoever it was, for that matter, Glenn Fry, if you want to go further back.
Yeah.
Linda. I do have actually photos of Linda because we're just around each other so much. But, it's just the photos that you don't have that if it was in the modern era, I'd probably be posting them all over my social media.
Yeah.
In those days, it was the height of uncoolness to, if I was with George Lucas to say, hey, George, can I get a picture with you? It was, no, you don't do that. It's very
Did
different.
you ever keep things over the years from like movies that you worked on?
Oh
Like
yeah,
any like keeps? Oh, cool. What are some of the things you kept? Like your notes or anything? Or
a lot of that stuff. I
yeah,
have I orchestrated in that period when I was orchestrating for my father, and he was working for John Landis. John directed the Thriller video,
yeah,
and there's about 7 minutes of score in the Thriller video, which I orchestrated,
that's
and
awesome.
I have those pages. That's one of my favorites. But I have all my Ewok scores, and I have all that stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
you keep that stuff. It's important.
Yeah, because you never know. So, like, it's just good to look back on one day. But no, that Thriller video, I always play it at Halloween. Like, I set up a projector on my front lawn for the kids coming by, and I play and I repeat. And just how good it was,
Yeah,
and just the makeup. Like, obviously, people knew at that point who Rick Baker was because he worked a lot with John Landis because they had a
yeah.
connection. He worked on Schlock and and American Werewolf in London. But like that video, because that was everywhere. Like
Yeah.
every Halloween, that was like at every party when I was a kid, you saw it over and over again. And just the makeup effects are unreal.
That was another one of those, jobs that took literally 3 days, and then we moved on. You didn't think about it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I got to meet Michael Jackson. That was another photo I don't have, and that was okay.
Yeah.
But and then you just move on.
That's all it is. Because you can't, you got to go, you always got to put your foot forward and go on to the next job.
That's correct. That's correct.
Awesome, Peter.
Well, this is cool.
Wasn't that great? Peter was asking me questions. Some of them I edited out, but it was so nice. He was really, he wanted to know about how we get people to be on the show and the process, like my big moments. So it's kind of like what we talked about with doing those Star Wars Ewok sequels. But yeah, he was so cool. A lot of cool things that I always remember because it's so many connections to different movies and different actors that we talked to and people that worked on them. But it was cool. Like I even admitted to him, like my dad was a huge, fan of The Great Escape, watched it all the time. So talking to, that he composes it for his father in those Elmer Bernstein tours that he does all over Europe and the Ghostbusters ones. I thought that was pretty neat. So hopefully the Ghostbusters, like he mentioned, 40-year anniversary next year. So we got to make sure we cover the second one for next year. That'd be like perfect harmony. So yeah. So your homework, watch Ewoks, The Battle for Endor. And that is on Disney Plus for free, which everybody has. How can you not have Disney Plus? Even if you don't have kids, it is awesome. They're not a sponsor, but I just wanted to tell you guys that. Yeah, so don't forget to review, rate, share our podcast. Follow us on all social media at Sequels Only. And don't forget to check out our website, sequelsonly.com. Good night.
Good night, guys.